Welcome to the Relentless Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Alton Hill, and we are uncovering ways to increase your worth, not only monetarily, but most importantly, through fulfillment. This podcast is about learning from those who've been successful and modeling their characteristics. So come along as we learn together and explore different strategies, not only to grow wealth, but also how we can stay fulfilled while we're doing it. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a loyal listener, thank you. We have several other podcast episodes available. You can find them at futuremoneytrends.com. iTunes are also on our Future Money Trends YouTube channel. This podcast is a great way to pick up good tips for building wealth. But if you're not already subscribed to our free newsletter, please log on to futuremoneytrends.com, type in your email, and get subscribed. Today, our guest is an entrepreneur who knows the challenges of growing a business from scratch. Today, we are going to gain some insight on some of the possibilities that we all truly possess that Brian has exhibited. Brian Saemann, he's the founder of Digital Agency School and CEO of his high six-figure marketing agency, GoBeyondSEO.com. He started his agency with no experience, no marketing education, or any connections in his industry. Now he wants to help other marketeers launch their own agencies so that they can build their ideal career and lifestyle. And I hope that that sounds familiar to everyone who listens to this show. It's about pursuing wealth, but having that fulfillment of a life that's rewarding to yourself and others. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alton. It's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoy the show.
All right. Well, this is going to be great. Before we really get into things, if you don't mind, just give us a little bit about your background that I left out.
Yeah, sure. I guess going way back, I grew up on Long Island in New York. It was a working class family. My dad was a mechanic on the Long Island Railroad. My mom worked for the police department. So I was actually the first person in my family to go to college.
Cool.
So yeah, it was awesome. You know, I was pretty excited. I ended up getting a degree in political science and philosophy, which not two of the most useful degrees out there, but you know, I certainly learned a lot. I really learned how to think, and I think that was the benefit of getting those degrees. But you know, I will say that when I got out, I think my parents may have been a little upset that I decided to continue bartending. I attended bar all the way through college to help pay for it, and I continued on that path. And you know, they might have thought maybe I could do a little better than that, but I did that for quite a while, and I actually started to build a career in hospitality business. And I moved out west with my girlfriend, who ended up becoming my wife. And we lived out there, and I had a hospitality career for a while out there. And then we had our first son, and I really wanted to move back to the East Coast. And a hospitality career, unfortunately, leads to very long hours. You're working nights, you're working weekends, you're kind of working when other people are off. So it really wasn't very conducive to, you know, trying to build my family at the same time.
Sure.
So I really started looking for ways to really get out of hospitality. I realized that I probably had made the wrong career choice. And, you know, luckily I started to teach myself. This was back in about 2007. I started to teach myself how to build websites, how to market those websites. I was building my own websites. I had AdSense sites. I sold an information product actually on how to get a bartending job. I had built e-commerce sites where I established relationships with drop shippers. And when people placed an order, I would, you know, have the drop shipper, the wholesaler, send them the product directly. And, you know, I had some success with that. And as I was getting more successful, people were asking me like, hey, you know, can you promote my business online? And that was really the beginnings of my agency, where, you know, other business owners and entrepreneurs started to ask me like, well, you know, how can you do this for me? So that was the start of it all.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, and I love the idea how you started the business without experience. And I have a lot of questions that revolve around that, but
sure.
If you don't mind, kind of help us understand what really motivated you to do that. It sounds like, you know, in your intro there, that some of it was a necessity, but then some of it, surely you took some initiative on. So what really motivated you to get that going?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, the motivation really was pretty self-serving. I really wanted to quit my job. I mean, essentially, I really wanted to get out of the business that I was in. I realized that while I enjoyed it for the 7 or 8 years that I was in it, now that I was married and starting a family, it just really wasn't going to be the lifestyle that I wanted. So my motivation in the beginning was really just, all right, I need to build this to a point where I can quit my job. And I think part of the reason, like I mentioned, I had started some e-commerce sites and some AdSense sites and some other things like that. And those made me, I made a few dollars, but I never made anything that would amount to a full-time income. And I think the reason why the agency really worked out for me was that I really do love marketing. I enjoy it a lot. I heard from people, because I think a lot of people out there are trying to find their passion, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? People are like, man, I want to pursue my passion, but I don't even really know what it is. And I had heard from somebody, if I'm a big reader, and they were like, all right, well, if you go into the bookstore, is there a section in the bookstore where you would just devour every book that's in there? You would enjoy reading them. And the marketing and sales section was that section for me. So
I love that.
Yes, I was just really into marketing, really, learned everything I could possibly learn about it, read a ton about it. And I also have a passion for just helping small business owners. For a while there, my dad did own a small business. He owned a deli on Long Island. So when I was really young, he owned that deli. And I can remember going in the mornings with him and things like that. So I'm the kind of guy who roots for the underdog. I really enjoy like the small business owner. I like working directly with small business owners. So I think that combination of really enjoying marketing and really feeling like I was helping people that I felt needed help was what allowed me to, because I had the motivation of making a full-time income for a long time, but it was the agency that really made things click for me.
Yeah. So what would you say really helped you gain the skill sets that you needed to be successful at that?
Just really being open to a self-education. I just was determined. I made the decision like, all right, I need to figure out how to make this work. I got to figure out how to, leverage the internet. I mean, this was back in 2007, so it wasn't as huge as it is now.
Sure.
I believe Google was a verb at that point, but I'm not 100% sure. And I just really wanted to figure out how to do that. So I jumped into everything, whether it was reading books by, Seth Godin and other marketers out there, or, really get involved in online courses. The first website I ever built, I actually built in HTML. It was, WordPress had come out, but it wasn't really popular yet.
Yeah.
And, I had no idea what I was doing. So I remember buying a course on how to build websites in HTML and just building that site and teaching myself how to do it, and just a whole lot of trial and error.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think it's just a matter of, deciding you're going to do something and being committed to making the sacrifices to do it.
So that was, you said you built your first website around 2007?
Yeah, it was like late 2007 or early 2008.
And then when did you really launch your agency?
The agency didn't really launch until about September of 2010.
Okay.
So for a stretch there, I was really kind of learning the skills that I needed in order to start my agency. So I was building my own websites, whether it be what really broke it open for me were some e-commerce websites where the biggest one was it was a bicycle store. So it was an online bike shop. And I would, build the websites. I think they were in OS Commerce, and, they were templated, but e-commerce websites.
Sure.
And developed some relationships with some drop shippers and wholesalers. So I was able to use my marketing skills to build the site and to get it exposure and get people to it. And then when they bought a bike, it was great. I didn't have to actually have the inventory. They bought the bike, and the drop shipper sends it off to them. But you don't really make a tremendous amount of money on a drop ship bike. Maybe it was $30, $50, $60 on a really great bike if somebody bought a really great one.
Sure.
So I was kind of putting myself through school. I was learning how to do these things. And then when people started to ask me like, well, okay, well, could you do that for me? I kind of had the chops already.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I guess you went to college and you got your degree. I'm going to ask a loaded question here. And then it sounds like you spent about 3 years or so getting your self-education. So how do you feel about that? If you have kids, what are you recommending to them?
Well, I do. I have 2 kids. I've got 2 boys. And I would have to say, I do not think college is essential. When I was a teenager and in high school, it was imperative to my parents that I go to college. They kind of saw it as like a ticket to, living a good life. That is not the case, So while I won't say I won't let them go, they're certainly allowed to go. I would say they cannot go into debt for it. That's the big thing to me. I think that college can be great. Like I said, I did learn how to think, but I didn't necessarily learn skills that were going to get me paid.
Right.
And, it's very hard to get out of school and to have those student loans and have to make those monthly payments and really not have a job or the opportunity for a job that's going to allow you to do that. So I think it was Jim Rohn that said, a formal education will get you a living and a self-education will make you a fortune or something like that.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that.
I love Jim Rohn. Definitely a good guy to quote and listen
he's
to.
All right. He's all right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you talk a lot about marketing. Tell us why it's so important. And I think if you don't mind, touch on both levels, because we do have small business owners and entrepreneurs that listen to the show, but we also have people that, they're just out, they're doing the 9-to-5 grind. But I think that learning how to market, and I think it's essential to them as well. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about why marketing is so important.
Sure. Yeah. I think in just, in the realm of if you've got a 9-to-5 job and you're not necessarily a small business owner, I see marketing, I view marketing as communication. So if you do own a business, your marketing is all the communication you have with your prospects and your customers. And if you don't own a business, marketing is still the communication you have, whether it be with your colleagues or your boss or your kids. Right? I mean, I have to sell my kids on getting out of bed like every day. So it's just a life skill, I think, in order to, be able to really position things in a way that are going to be appealing to others. There is the key element that thing actually will be helpful and will be valuable to them. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, hey, I have this kind of not so great product or not so great service, but if I market it the right way, then things are going to work out great for me. And that's totally wrong. You've got to have a really good product or service before the marketing is going to work. But I do feel like for everybody out there, when I was still working full time, like I mentioned, I was building the websites and the agency didn't really get going until September 2010. I was working full time in hospitality. You can work 60 hours a week, but I would say that even though my main objective was to get out of that job, I was still one of the best employees at that job. So I just I was definitely marketing myself and definitely just working so hard that there was no way anybody would be like, oh, well, he wasn't getting it done. Like I was going to make sure that I was getting it done there too. So, and there's a little bit of marketing involved in that too. Sure,
definitely. I think that's great. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you struggled with. I mean, coming to this game without a lot of experience, I'm sure that day came to where you said, I'm out, I'm doing this for real. Tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you had and how you overcame those.
Yeah. There was a ton of struggles along the way. It's interesting to tell the story. I think sometimes you can gloss over the struggles and it just sounds like it was easy. Oh yeah. People think, oh, you're an overnight success, but it's just not true. You really got to put the hours in and you've got to do the hard work in order to get there. So, I had struggles that were, some of the small everyday struggles. The very first website that I actually charged somebody for, I was getting ready to launch it. And, they were waiting to, click on their browser and go see it. And I pressed the button and it exploded. This website just disappeared.
Oh, no.
And it was a disaster. And I was panicking because they had an old website that I had removed. I couldn't get that back up. I couldn't get the new one up. So it was a nightmare. And I actually ended up reaching out to somebody who I was just like really Googling for solutions. And I found a blog that was very helpful. And I went through all the steps and I tried to get it done then. It still didn't work. And I just reached out to the person who had written the blog on Twitter. And I was like, hey, I'm in a really bad spot. Can you help me? And I gave her the login info and she logged in and just really helped me through it. It was an amazing experience to see that somebody who I didn't even know was willing to just like really help me out and help me get over that hurdle. So there were plenty of situations like that where it's just like, those are going to happen, right? Like you can't wait to take action thinking you're going to eliminate all of that stuff. The lights are never all going to be green. So I would put that in kind of like even though the day of I almost had a heart attack, it's kind of like everybody's going to experience something like that. But,
sure.
But some of the other struggles or like bigger struggles, I definitely for a while, I feel like struggling on my mindset and making sure that my mindset is right is something that I kind of constantly struggle with. I try to really cultivate a success mindset. I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to think, all right, I've made it, or think that, on the opposite end of the spectrum, sometimes I'll think like, oh, who am I to be doing this or things like that. So I've really tried to cultivate the right entrepreneurial mindset. And that's been a big part of maintaining, getting and maintaining success. And then another thing was just over time, after a couple of years, we had some success and we started to really grow. We went and we got like the fancy office space and, we were in a hip part of town and we had the skyline view of Charlotte and all of this. And we had to hire employees and we started offering services that, we probably weren't the best in the world at. We weren't great at them. And we actually started working with bigger companies. And I realized that I don't get charged up working with a CMO. I don't get charged up working with a marketing manager. I like really interacting with the business owner and the entrepreneur. And, it just became evident that we had gone in the wrong direction. I was like, man, I bought myself this 30 to 45 minute commute. What am I doing? So I really felt like, all right, I got to make a U-turn here and get back to the things that I really enjoy and get back to offering the services that we're really great at. And so that was a struggle. I mean, that took some time to really, recognize, all right, this is not what I want to be doing, because I think you're right. Fulfillment's not just about how much money can you make, but are you doing what you're passionate about? And I had really gotten away from that. So that was a big thing for me, was to get back to, working with the people that I wanted to work with and doing the types of things that I felt like really had an impact on them and on their life.
Yeah, no, I think that that's great. And I think that it's great that you recognized that. And then not only did you recognize it, but then you made a decision to change it and to bring it back to where you wanted to be, which I think that, I can't speak for you, but I would say that a lot of people who maybe, hey, look, I've got this fancy office, I'm downtown, I'm big time. And then to give that up, I would assume, take some guts in of itself, right? To say, I'm going to stick to what I really love and kind of take that step back. So that's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know if it took guts. I was just so miserable. I just really had gotten miserable. I was like, man, what did I do? So I really just had to retrace my steps and just think about, what do I really, what gets me charged up? What gets me jumping out of bed in the morning? I want to focus more on that. Yeah.
So about that and about your enjoyment of marketing, if you don't mind, give us something that, teach us something about marketing. If we're trying to market ourselves in our 9-to-5, or if we're trying to market our business, what are some of the just basic things that you think that we need to know?
Sure. One of the things that I try to teach, one of the very first things that I try to teach people who are trying to start a digital agency is that you've got to get really clear on who you help and exactly what you do. So like a lot of folks who start an agency and let's say they're doing some networking, trying to get some clients, and somebody says, hey, well, what do you do? The response, and I was guilty of this for sure in the beginning, the response is, well, I own a marketing agency, or, I do social media, and it's like an I own or an I do or an I am kind of statement. I am a social media marketing maven, whatever funny way people want to come up with. But I implore people to really come up with what I call an I help statement. And it's a new way of positioning yourself where you're leading with your prospect's problem, because you need to be a solution to a problem. If you're just a service provider, then you've got a million competitors out there and it's going to be hard to stand out from the crowd. But if you're able to present yourself as a solution to a specific group of people, you immediately stand out. So, the example of an I help statement might be, I help dentists get new leads and patients through digital marketing. Or, I help lawyers get new clients through digital marketing. Or you can be more specific if you do social media, or you do AdWords management, or whatever the specific service you might offer. So I think that's really one of the fundamental things that a lot of people miss out on, is to really focus on how can I position myself so that I'm leading with my prospect's problem, and I'm also presenting myself as a solution to their problem.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I would even push that into like even an interview situation for people who are going for a job, right? And kind of positioning themselves as, like you said, the solution to that problem instead of just a fill in the blank. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of people in a job interview or even as a small business owner, they might think, I need to present my credentials, right? I got to show like I have this credential, I got this certificate, or I'm certified in this, or I have this degree. And for the most part, people don't care. People really don't care. They just essentially want to know, can you solve my problem?
Yeah. I think a lot of times it really is that simple. So that's great stuff. One thing that I was looking at when I was kind of researching you and seeing what your skill set was, that you had something on there about how to attract high value clients, which I think, again, going back, can serve both audiences that are doing the 9-to-5, but also the small business people. So tell us a little bit about attracting those high value clients.
Sure. A lot of the folks that I work with who are starting agencies, they're usually a freelancer, or they're currently working like in-house at a company, or they're working at an agency, and they've got a couple clients on the side. And they'll complain that, hey, I can only get the nickel and dime clients, right? I keep getting the folks who they just want me to work for them, and they don't realize how long it takes me to do this, and they're not willing to pay. So that will happen, especially when you're just kind of taking whatever you can get. So like the first step in really attracting, I call it the 5 Ds. So the first step in really attracting and starting to attract the high value clients is something we've already talked about, but determine exactly what it is that you do, right? So come up with that I help positioning statement. Know exactly what you do and exactly who you help and what problem you solve for them. And then that way you can present yourself as a solution to their problem. And then kind of tied into that is the second D, which is determining your ideal customer. I struggled with this for a long time, like as far as like just niching down into whether it's a specific service or more likely a specific industry or a specific group of people. I think a lot of small businesses are a little scared to niche down because it feels counterintuitive. You start to think, well, I don't want to turn anybody away. What if they think I only work with dentists and they're a chiropractor, or whatever the industries might be. But you're presenting yourself so much better when you really do just niche down and really determine who your ideal customer is. It makes it easier for you because you actually get to know them and their problems and like their language, right? Every business has its own jargon and its own language. So when you're really focusing in on one specific industry, you can really learn a lot about them and about what their problems are and how to solve them. And that kind of moves to the third D, which is developing the right bait. So if you're out there and you're looking for high value clients, now you know what you do and you know exactly who you're targeting. Well, what can you develop that would be appealing to them as I call it a foot in the door offer, or your small offer, which is, all right, well, if I'm working with lawyers who really want to get leads on their website through their website, well, I can offer an audit, right? And an audit's a big part of my business. So we'll offer up a free audit or a paid audit and say, all right, well, we'll go into your website and we'll take a look at kind of what you're doing wrong or why these folks aren't turning into leads. So that's like a small piece where I'll call it the bait, right? Because a lot of times phishing is the metaphor that's used for sales or prospecting. So that's something that I can offer to them that's kind of a no-brainer for them. They're like, okay, for this small amount of money, you'll go in, look at my website, tell me what's wrong. And then as I'm showing them that, then I'm able to really kind of pitch my higher value service on the back end. So I'll show them the audit. I'll show them the things that they're doing wrong. They could take it and go implement it on their own. And some people do that. Or they could be like, wow, that's a lot of really cool stuff. Why don't I hire you to do it?
Sure.
So yeah, that's a big part of that. And then the other 2 Ds of the 5 Ds is they kind of envelope the other 3, which is to deliver amazing results. Referrals. People, like if you've got low value clients or nitpicky clients, they're probably hanging out with nitpicky folks. So they're going to refer you to the people they hang out with. So you really want to really deliver amazing results and present this value so that as you're getting the higher value clients, they're going to start to refer you out to their friends who are also going to be higher value clients.
Right.
And then throughout the whole thing, you really just want to demonstrate your own value. So that's the 50, to demonstrate value. I've found in my business, whenever I'm doing really well, I'm usually asking myself, how can I add value to this situation? I'm usually asking that all the time. And it's when I lose sight of trying to add value to other people's lives and to whatever situation I might be in, that's when things start to falter. So I really try to focus every day on, hey, how can I add value here? How can I make this a little bit better for them?
Yeah, definitely. If you want better results, then ask better questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, one other question I want to ask is, what would you say are some traits that have helped you be successful?
Sure. That's an awesome question. I would say for me, the kind of 2 things come to mind that really helped me out. And one was just persistence. I just kind of cracked. I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to make this work. And I just decided I'm just going to keep going until it works. And I really think that there's something to that. I think there's a lot to that. I think that a lot of people think that there might be some, super secret tactic or whatever it might be that's going to kind of get you over the hump. And really, it's just like deciding I'm going to make this work and really committing, realizing that you're probably going to have to make sacrifices in order to make it work, and just committing to those sacrifices and just doing it. So I have a couple of quotes hanging up in my office, and 2 of them are really about persistence. One is from Calvin Coolidge, where he just talks about how persistence has solved every problem that's ever faced mankind. And another one actually was pretty interesting. It's George Bernard Shaw, who was a playwright and also a co-founder of the London School of Economics. So that's kind of an odd thing, but
okay.
But it's from one of his plays where he talks about circumstances, and he says he doesn't believe in circumstances, that the people who really succeed in this world go out and look for the circumstances that they want instead of blaming the circumstances that they're in. And then if they can't find them, they make them. And the real ironic thing about that quote, and I didn't do it word for word there, but was that when I was still working full time, my employer actually hung that up on one of the bulletin boards right outside the employee break room. And I was building my agency at the time, and it just really struck me. I was like, wow, I'm trying to build the circumstances I want. And I looked at that thing every day. Nice. They were trying to motivate the employees, and I was really taking it as motivation to build my own thing and get out of there. So that one really was big for me. So that really helped me persist. So trying to create my own circuit. So persistence, I think, is huge. And I also think cultivating a positive attitude, just really trying to, again, look for situations where you can add value, and just being positive, just looking for ways. Whenever you start to really focus on the negative, then it's the negative that comes back at you. And when you focus on, all right, well, how can I do this right? Or how can I really help these folks? And it just really, really cultivating a positive attitude. I try to do something every day that it's kind of like a daily practice where I try to do something that's going to help or make me be positive mentally, something that's going to help me physically, and then something that's going to help me, spiritually or emotionally, and do a little bit every day. I really think a little bit every day adds up to a lot.
Yeah, well, I think it's a pretty common theme on the show from successful people that, you can talk about the business side, but it almost always comes back to the mindset. And it was a couple interviews ago, talked to someone who had lost $20 million. And it's like, you have to have the right mindset to overcome that, because if you don't, then, whatever marketing skills you have or whatever technical skills you have, they're not going to matter because you don't have it together enough to utilize it. So I think that's great stuff.
Yeah. I listened to that interview. I listened to a few, and, that story is absolutely amazing. And you do see that out there where people will lose a fortune. James Altucher is one of a blogger out there that I pay attention to. I listen to his podcast as well. And he talks about that a lot, where, he lost $15 million and then, was a mess for a while and then got his mindset back and rebuilt his mindset before he could rebuild, his wealth. It really does. I think mindset comes first. I think happiness comes first. A lot of times people think, my happiness is just over this one obstacle. And I think that it's the wrong way to look at things. If you could be like, all right, well, maybe if I could be, happy first, that's going to help me and develop that mindset so that I'll be able to get over the obstacle, instead of making it over and then the next day realizing, wow, now I just have another mountain in front of me. So I think kind of reversing that a little bit is really helpful.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, you've delivered a lot of value today. Is there anything else that you want to leave our audience with?
I guess I would just say I'm gonna guess that your audience is probably pretty similar to me. I love the shows, and probably similar to me really back when I was really just getting my business started. Mm-hmm. And if I was going to go back to myself really in that time, or to your listeners right now, if they've got something, I know a lot of your listeners, they really want to make a positive change in their life, financially and also in a fulfillment and a passion arena as well. And I would just say that, if they're listening to this, they probably already know how they would make that change and how they would make that impact. It's probably in the back of their mind. It might be gnawing at them a little bit. It might be that thing that keeps them up at night. And I would just invite them to do it. Just take a small action and start moving yourself towards that thing. I think one of my biggest regrets is just waiting so long, and just, kind of being caught up in that, analysis paralysis, where, I would be so concerned about how I was going to get something done. I think now I've realized what's really important is, figuring out exactly what you want and exactly why you want it. I think the why is critical. And if you have those two components, you figure out the how along the way. Websites might blow up on you, clients might quit, whatever it is, but you figure out the how along the way. And I know for me, I was focused on the how a little too much in the beginning. And if I focused more on the what I wanted and why I wanted it and just took small actions, I think I would have succeeded a lot faster.
Well, I think that's excellent advice, and I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been awesome. And like I said, so much value. So I really want to say thank you for that.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's awesome to be here.
All right. Great to have Brian Saemann on the show with us. Definitely one of my favorite interviews. So he dropped a lot of value on us, and it's going to be hard for me to distill it down to my key takeaways, but I'm going to give it a shot, give you a couple of things that I highlighted. First one is that how critical self-education really is. He even went as so far as to say that it's probably more important than getting an education from a university. He talked about how important communication was, and how that can really make a huge difference, whether you're running your own business or if you're doing the 9-to-5 thing. The third thing that he mentioned was that all the lights will never be green. There's always going to be some yellow lights. There's going to be some red lights, but essentially waiting doesn't remove all of that risk. So whatever it is in life, whether it's investments or your home life or your job, whatever it is, it's okay to take that risk. And don't be fooled into thinking that if you just sit around and not act, that somehow is going to remove the risk. He talked about even, trying to figure out how to do everything, and that was really a fallacy in his mind. But the fourth thing, I guess, is that he mentioned you got to get clear on what it is that you do and what you want and who you help. So I think that that's a little self-evaluation for us each to do, is figure out who are you and who do you really help, and really let that resonate inside of you so that you can communicate that well to others. And I guess the last thing is that he really talked about having a positive attitude and each day trying to figure out how is it that you are going to add value to other people's lives. So I would encourage everyone to ask yourself, how was it that you added value to someone's life today, and how are you going to do that tomorrow? And I think if you're running a business and you're not asking those questions, then it's going to be rocky, right? But even in the 9 to 5, even in your own relationships, your friends, your spouse, what is it that you're doing to really add value? And I think that, at least I can speak for myself, that every time I put in effort, every time I try to add value into a situation, you never regret those things. Now, it may not go exactly the way you want, but if you are, if you're really putting that effort in and putting that energy into something, you're going to get out what it is that you put in. So I encourage y'all to go out and add value to everyone around you. And like Brian says, go out there and take that action, even if it's just a little action toward what it is that you're passionate about. Get out there and do it. So it's always the goal that this podcast brings value to your day, and I hope that you're inspired to focus more on what it is that you are passionate about. Please subscribe. If you know someone that can benefit from this podcast, please share this with them. As always, thank you for listening, and I'd love any of your feedback, questions, or maybe guests that you'd like to have on the show. Feel free to reach out to me at Alton@futuremoneytrends.com.